Hi, mystery writers. Welcome to Write a Killer Mystery, where we learn to make a good mystery great. And one of the ways to do that is using subtext, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute and how you can get your reader very involved in your story with subtext. First, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon for their continued support. They help support the equipment and time to produce these videos and also support my mystery writing. If you would like to support Write a Killer Mystery, there's a link in the description below. Okay, so let's talk about subtext. Subtext is the meaning behind a character's action or dialogue. And if you've been following me for a while, you know that I just consider dialogue another form of action. All right. And the strength of subtext lies in the way the reader participates in the story. This is what is so crucial about subtext in your writing. Subtext works in your story in several ways. Characters may say one thing when they think, feel, or act in another way. There may be dynamics that the character, let's see, how can I say this? Character acts in a way that they're not consciously aware of their action or the consequences of their action. Subtext can also reflect thematic motifs and meanings that can be derived from the text, even if the characters themselves aren't there. And also, subtext helps with character information that's implicitly revealed as they speak. When they're keeping hidden thoughts or emotions, but unintentionally reveal something to us in the way that they talk. All right. Characters. Another way you can use subtext is with implication, and that's when characters intentionally communicate or imply something without outright saying it. So accusations or passive aggressiveness, sugarcoating, euphemisms, sarcasm. Subtext is reading between the lines in all of those ways. Okay. So how do you use subtext in your story? And I think this is especially critical for us as mystery writers because we're setting up things early in the story. We're foreshadowing things that are going to happen later in the story. We're planting clues and hiding clues. And that can come through actions and dialogue as well. But one of the things about using subtext is engaging your reader with the character, because characters invest your readers in this story. I know I say this a lot, but when the readers care about your character, they care about the story. The more human your character is, the more believable. And the more believable the character, the easier it is for your reader to connect with your character. And subtext works in stories the way it works in real life, and that's why it's so powerful in your story. Readers work to figure out what a character really means, what's behind that action, and they do it in the same way they would if they encountered that behavior in real life. People rarely articulate their emotions or organize their thoughts by stating them outright. Um, how often do you say, I am angry? Not very often. But you may express your anger in a lot of different ways. And the same is true for your characters. So narrative implies, I'm sorry, subtext implies what narrative spells out, and it challenges your reader to deduce the implications. And whenever you're challenging your reader to deduce implications, you're engaging them in the story. Characters unpack their feelings and organize their thoughts long before they express them or act on them. And the subtext is what you foreshadow. It's how characters speak or act before the characters themselves are able to unpack feelings or thoughts fully. So you can see how this really humanizes your characters, all right? I really want to stress that subtext connects your readers. When you engage your reader at that emotional level and the intellectual level of deducing what is really behind a character's actions or dialogue, they are investing themselves in your story. Subtext means readers look for what is missing, what's about to happen, what's being foreshadowed, and what's underneath what's happening right now in the moment in the story. Readers are actively engaged in figuring out the text that makes any reveals or developments more compelling. You can express subtext through the dynamics of who's in charge, who looks up to who, what characters think of one another, the thematic or deeper messages in the story. There's just so many ways to use subtext without just blatantly making a statement, right? So you can show character flaws, you can show strengths and abilities and issues and hidden emotions or thoughts, a character's internal world that they aren't openly communicating with other characters. You can imply a character communicating something without actually specifying it. So an example of that implication is in The Godfather. Now my mind's gone blank, but it's like, give them something they won't forget, all right? So even without a lot of direct conflict in your story, you can use subtext to engage your reader, and you should absolutely use implication and hidden thoughts and emotions in the scenes with less like big conflict, all right? Characters will have emotions lingering from past scenes that they haven't resolved yet. And those emotions carry over into how they speak in scenes later on. And subtext makes reading your story more interesting. So that's especially true. You can use subtext in those scenes where there isn't a major conflict, it's a minor conflict. Where you're really pulling out your character's emotions and engaging your reader. When characters act and speak with subtext, your reader is drawn into the story. And rather than stating everything on the nose, as they say in screenwriting, subtext challenges your reader to connect with the character in order to understand the action. And that's the key. It's that reader challenge. It's like getting them involved. So that's why it's so engaging for your reader. You can use subtext to foreshadow a character's emotions before they come out in dialogue. For example, when characters are working themselves up to saying something, and they're not necessarily hiding how they're feeling, but they're clearly dwelling on something else and unable to articulate it. They aren't saying it yet. So that's all part of how dialogue is part of the action, because it is showing that characters struggle with their feelings, and their body language doesn't exactly contradict what they're saying, but it shows a more or less intense version of what they're saying. So subtext explains contradiction, like someone holding in their anger or their tears or feigning outrage, or it might be when they say something that doesn't match their normal speech patterns, so it's out of sync with their character, and it's very noticeable, and your reader's like, whoa, why would she say that? So every time you call your reader to question why a character is acting a certain way, you connect them emotionally with your story, and that is the power of subtext. Connect that emotional connection. So I call subtext your writing power tool. When your reader connects with your characters, you hook them into caring about what happens next. Your readers want what your character wants, and you create an on-page connection with the words and action your character uses. Subtext makes your reader work to make those connections. And the reader won't be able to probably to articulate why they have this connection, but with that subtext, you're involving them, they're investing themselves in the story because they are working at thinking about what is really going on. So the more your reader invests in the character, the more they want to continue the story. And each time you supply new subtext, you engage your reader further into the story. And that's why it's so powerful when you want your reader to get all the way to those 300 pages or more. You want them to get to the end. You keep helping them reinvest in the story. The reader's looking for what's missing, the foreshadowing, the hidden meanings. So incorporate subtext with the dynamics between your characters, the themes, the characters' hidden thoughts or emotions, and implication. So help your reader get into the story by connecting them to the reader's emotions through subtext. So I hope that helps you understand it. Subtext, a lot of people talk about subtext as, the character says one thing when they're acting a different way, and that is one way that you can use subtext. But I think if you think about all the ways that I've talked about today, you'll be helping your reader invest in your story and giving them that emotional connection that keeps driving them to read more. All right, so thank you once again for following Write a Killer Mystery, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe and click that little notification bell so you'll know when the next episode of Write a Killer Mystery is here, and keep writing.